Hi there, and welcome to another video with a fabulous RibeyeRach. And it's unusual for me to have someone back very quickly, but there were so many views and so many comments and so much we didn't discuss. I've asked her straight back. So, hi, Racheal, how are you?
Doing great. I'm glad to be back. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good. It's one of the fascinating things for me, and I'm sure this has happened to you, is comments that don't believe you're a real person or you really did this. And I had some flat out comments saying you can't reverse that condition. You can't. And it's very frustrating. So for those, if you're going to do that comment, great, because the engagement goes up. It's fantastic. So thanks for that. But for the 98.9% of people who look at these videos and with an open mind think it's great, that's why we're here. Okay. So Racheal, I'll open the questioning because the big thing that stuck in my mind after the last interview was you mentioned so many other solutions other than carnivore, which is fine. Because I ground. I was thinking of all the things I do that I just do anyway. Morning sunlight, I do it. So the brain training thing really, really interested me. So how did you get into that, and what actually is it?
Yeah, so honestly, I heard about brain retraining probably 5 years before I started it. And speaking of comments on that past video that we did, there was somebody that commented, I don't believe in brain retraining because this is a physical illness. And that comment is one that, I get fairly often. And it's also where I used to be in a mindset of, well, that doesn't sound like it can work because I have real illness. And it makes me so sad when people comment that because it's not what brain retraining means at all. The need for brain retraining and working on the nervous system does not suggest that your illness isn't real. It doesn't suggest that it isn't serious, and it doesn't suggest that it isn't a real physical illness. And so basically brain retraining is a concept where our brains are plastic and they can change. And so all sorts of different things wire our brain either in a positive way or in a negative way. And so brain retraining is the idea that you are consistently signaling safety to your brain so that your nervous system can shift into a parasympathetic state where healing can actually start to take place. And so our nervous system has two main states: a parasympathetic state, and that's a state where we have rest, repair, and healing. And then we have the sympathetic state, and that's kind of the fight or flight state, the survival state. And so usually when people are dealing with a chronic illness, their nervous system tends to get stuck in this chronic dysregulated state, in either a chronic state of fight or flight or freeze or shutdown. And the nervous system isn't working properly. And so brain retraining is something that we can do to rewire our brains to allow for healing. And so the main idea with it is that we visualize ourselves healthy and strong, and that visualization signals safety to the brain. And the brain doesn't know the difference between visualization and reality. And so it can be very powerful for healing. And it definitely has been for me. And after so many years of being told that I had lifelong chronic illnesses and genetic illnesses and healing wasn't possible for me, there's nothing I can do to heal. Like, you don't want to believe it, but after a while it kind of, it gets in your head. And so another aspect of brain retraining is belief work and letting go of limiting beliefs and allowing yourself to believe that you can heal. And so it definitely involves a lot of different things. And for me, I started with a brain retraining program. There are lots of brain retraining programs out there. I personally started with a program called DNRS. So that stands for the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. And it's interesting because when people hear brain retraining, they often think it's this like mysterious thing that, is secret and you have to buy this program to figure it out. And really those programs are just a toolkit. It's just like a course. It helps you to get the tools that you need to heal. So I always like to tell people, like, you can heal without a brain retraining program. You can figure it out on your own. You can learn how to rewire your brain on your own, but often those programs can be really helpful. And for me, it definitely was just having kind of that toolkit and that guidance to help me to know where to start, because this is a really foreign concept in our society, which is unfortunate because I think everybody is living with a degree of nervous system dysregulation because, our society isn't conducive to having a healthy nervous system. And so for me, rewiring my brain in combination with changing my diet was, the most powerful thing. And I think it's kind of cool because I changed my diet probably 8 months before I started brain retraining. And I saw, that improvement. And then I implemented brain retraining and I saw a whole new layer of healing and improvement. And so it was cool that I didn't start them both at the same time, and because then I would really know what progress I made from what. But I would definitely say that the brain retraining work I did brought quicker progress for my healing than changing my diet. And so it's been really impactful for me. And I think when brain retraining, usually what people think of is like a program that you do, but really at the core of brain retraining is like what you eat wires your brain, what you think about wires your brain, so many things like spending time on screens wires your brain, social media wires your brain, like all these things can wire your brain either in a positive way or a negative way. And so focusing on rewiring your brain in a positive way can be really impactful for you.
Yeah. And I think this thing about the mind and body connection not being a thing, there's a few analogies I always give to people. One is, if you had to bet your life savings on somebody winning a race and it was two twins, it was standing in front of you and they were exactly the same from birth, they trained the same, they ate the same, and one twin said, I'm going to win this race for you. I know it. I feel it in my bones. I'm going to win this race. And the other one said, I'm not on it today. I'm really not on it. So you've got exactly the same physical situation, but you've got two completely different mindsets.
Right.
And I know who everybody would bet on. So that sort of proves that anyone that says there's no such thing as mind-body connection, that sort of disproves it. And there's a couple of other things. I use a Shakti mat for my lower back pain, or I did use it, and I couldn't lie on it for more than a minute. And I didn't understand how people could fall asleep on it because I was trying it for the first time. I didn't have that plastic attitude. My neuroplasticity wasn't in place. This was a long time ago, by the way. And within 6 weeks, I could lie on a Shakti mat, which is like a sort of acupressure, bed of nails, however you want to put it. And I would fall asleep. I would absolutely fall asleep. So your body is obviously adapted because it's the physical mat's the same, your body is the same, but your perception of pain is the same. And pain is an abstract. It is a perception. You can't put a number on pain. You can try to, but when that perception's slightly skewed, I mean, when I did my honours degree in the somatosensory part of the brain, there was a boy who could put his hand into fires because his perception of pain was not wired correctly. Now, they rewired him through retraining. So, I mean, that's happened. And the final thing you mentioned flight or fight. Well, that's the stress response, so if a tiger walked in now, all the blood would leave my guts and go to my muscles and make me run away or fight the tiger if I was stupid enough to try that. Probably would run. Well, if you're in a stressful situation all the time, this, at work, or you can't tell your boss to, do one or whatever, and you have a stressful relationship, your guts are going to turn over. You're not going to digest properly. So there are so many things that can be external, not physical, that can change the physical. I mean, there's too many examples. So, yeah, that's great. So that was a really good answer. And I think we will still get comments, but there you go. You also mentioned sort of somatic practices, like body centered modalities to sort of like enhance your awareness, release tension. What was that about?
Yeah, so I think this one is often one of the most difficult things to explain, and I definitely wouldn't consider myself an expert in this area, but somatic practices definitely have been helpful for me in my healing. And basically, it's using the sensation of physical touch to bring your brain into the present. So often with nervous system dysregulation, we find ourselves either stuck in the past or worrying about the future, and so it's just kind of different practices that you can do. Like for me, one of my favorite things to do is something called the containment hug. So you just like put your hand on your armpit and like this, and you're kind of giving yourself a hug, and that signals safety to your brain and can kind of calm the nervous system. And there are lots of different somatic practices that you can do. I've just literally gone on YouTube and typed somatic practices, and you can kind of do guided visualizations or guided somatic practices. And Instagram has a lot of good resources for this as well. And like I said, I wouldn't consider myself an expert on it, but I've found benefit from it. And I think it's kind of a top down and a bottom up approach when it comes to nervous system regulation, and somatic practices are more of a bottom up, so body to brain versus brain to body.
Yeah, and the Alexander technique, I think, is the most sort of popular example of that, where you can move your body in certain ways. I think there's a lot to be said for that sort of thing. The self-hugging bit is always interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a few people that try that now you've demonstrated it. But hugging has a huge role to play in how you grow as an animal. I remember seeing some studies where horrible studies actually on animals, but we learned something from it, where they brought this monkey up and it had choices between food and not even its mother. It was like a piece of metal that was slightly warm, and it had a soft sort of fabric around it, and it could either hug that or go and get food. And it chokes me a bit because I saw the video of it, and it was desperate for hugs. It was desperate for attention over food, which I thought was incredible. So we need to be open-minded, which brings us into the next realm. This really is a whistle stop, but I think, people can pick up on it, and maybe we could do a third one. But anyway, letting go of limiting beliefs.
So, yeah.
I think my life's been that. Before you give your answer, my life was high carb, calories in, calories out, skim milk, blueberries, all those sort of things, but other things as well, sort of social, economic beliefs, political beliefs, how we operate as humans, the good in people, everything, all my beliefs since I was 50, so that was 10 years ago, have been completely 180. So many of my beliefs that limited a lot of what I did, and also my physical performance and everything. Absolutely. I had to let go of a lot of beliefs, and it's very difficult to say you're wrong, especially after 50 years. But that's why this is really important. So I'll give you a real practical example. It wasn't until I had oxalate detoxing myself, oxalate crystals actually coming out of my eyes, did I fully believe it, even though I'd seen it. So those people that do give comments, that's what you got to do. You've got to be open-minded, and sometimes you do need to experience it yourself, and I get that. So that's my confession there, full transparency. It took that for me to really believe that actually happened. But what's your take on this? Because I see you roll your eyes about, this is a real big one.
Yes, I think this can be one of the biggest shifts for people in their chronic illness healing journey, and one of the most important things, because if you don't think you're going to get better, if you believe that you're going to be sick forever, if you believe that the illness you have isn't curable or isn't possible to heal from, then chances are you probably won't get all the way better. And the cells, listen, I know that sounds crazy, but they do. And so for me, it was huge. And I think for so long, like, a lot of people see like the need for brain retraining and all these things with the nervous system for people that are really negative, and for people that just like view life from this lens of negativity. And I never really felt like I was totally one of those people. But once I I was overall pretty positive, like I'm going to do the best I can to live the best possible life, even though I have these illnesses and even though I have limitations. I'm going to do everything I can to live the best life I can. And so that was one of the reasons why I didn't think brain retraining would work for me, because I was generally pretty positive. But once I became more aware of like paying attention to my thought patterns, and I started to realize that I did have negative thought patterns. And I did have, and I mean, anybody dealing with a serious illness is going to, like, it's inevitable, you know? And so working on those and then letting go of limiting beliefs, I think some people don't really know where to start, right? Like, how do I believe I can recover? And how do I believe healing is possible for me? And I always tell people to start with the curiosity. So say, what if I could heal? What if I could fully recover? What if that doctor was wrong? What if I can heal from this illness that he says is lifelong and incurable? What if I could get better like this other person I saw on social media? And so just starting with that curiosity is great, because beliefs don't change overnight, right? Like, especially core beliefs that are really ingrained in you, like that takes a lot to change. And so I think just starting with the curiosity, saying I'm going to be open-minded and be willing to be wrong, and that can be really powerful. And so for me, it was just a gradual shift. It went from like, what if I could recover? What if I could fully heal, you know? And that got me excited. And I started to listen to like more recovery stories. And I think watching other people heal can help you heal as well. And so I think, yeah, I mean, limiting beliefs, like you said, they apply to so many aspects of our life, right? Not just illness and symptoms, and it's relationships, it's athletics, it's movement, it's so many aspects of our life that limiting beliefs can have an impact on. And so it's been, yeah, really powerful for me to do belief work and to recognize what beliefs I hold and do things to shift those beliefs. And that takes time, but yeah, for me it's been really powerful. And I'd say that was a turning point in my healing journey, when I started to fully believe that I could recover, not just want to, because everybody that's sick wants to recover, right? Like everybody wants to get better, but do you believe you can get better? Those are two very different things. And so that was a shift for me. And I can't tell you how many people have said the same thing.
Yes, wanting and believing, that's a real key difference, because nobody wants to be ill,
Right.
but if you believe you can get better. I would say outside influences have been a big thing for me. You don't mind me telling a few little anecdotes in between what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So I've had this. When I was 23, I was shown a very convincing image of my hip and told I'd be in a wheelchair by 50. Here I am, 60 this year, and playing five-a-side soccer every single Wednesday. So that didn't happen. When I went deaf, which incidentally was about the same time, and yes, I'm happy for comments speculating on why that happened. Also, by this time, I'd lost both my parents and a girlfriend to breast cancer. So, my doctor said, this isn't very scientific. I think you don't want to hear much anymore. So maybe, all this constant negativity coming from the outside could have really affected me. And it did, but it made me do something, because I thought, well, why do I have to accept I'll be in a wheelchair when I'm 50? And with the deafness, I've had not only sort of some abstract things happen, but I've had some quantifiable empirical data. So, like I say, been deaf since 23 years old. I'm 59 now and 60 in May, and I've had hearing tests with the same audiologist, same machine for many, many years. When I went carnivore, he said at the test after it finished, I can't. What are you doing? I think the machine's not right, because you seem to have recovered a little bit of hearing. That should not happen. Not, wow, how did this happen? That should not happen. So then I sort of said sheepishly, well, I've been trying this diet. Oh, well, it can't be that. It can't be that. So people you deal with who you could possibly influence have limiting beliefs, even with very fancy equipment, knowing, that person knew me. There's no way I was lying about any of the responses. Got to the point where he actually said, I'm going to take your responses out and wire you up and see what's going on. So it's not even you saying something back or pressing a button when you hear a sound. I want to actually see it. Even with all of those things, still did not believe that could happen. And I get that, Racheal. I get so many stories where people say, I've reversed lesions of my MS, but the doctor came in really cross. This shouldn't happen. So you will get that. And, so going back to sort of carnivore centric, if you're eating this way and people are telling you can't eat this way, it's not going to be good for you. That is a limiting belief they have, but it shouldn't limit your beliefs. And certainly you will be frustrated when you lose some weight, you lower your blood pressure, your blood glucose management is better, your insulin goes down, you feel great, you sleep better. You will find it very frustrating. So just remember that phrase, that they have the limiting beliefs because they've been told. So it's like a sort of domino effect, and you're going to be pushing back those dominoes and just stacking them back up by saying, look, you can do something. You can do this.
Yeah.
Because
it's amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you carry on. Carry on.
Oh, I was just going to say, hearing that from a figure of authority, we're kind of taught to trust what doctors say, right? And so that can be even harder to let go of beliefs that are kind of passed down from these figures of authority that we were kind of taught to trust, right? And so that can be a huge barrier for people as well. And that's an amazing story that you told. Were you able to gain back full hearing?
No. Let's full transparency here. My hearing is atrocious, but it was next to nothing. So it was just going down and down and down. I wear hearing aids. I've got the captions on. Oh, we'll talk about putting things into our own hands in a second. Actually, talk about the captions I put on for myself. The very, very loud speaker. So with Zoom I can lip read. So I have all these things, all these strategies. So we're going to talk about taking my healing into my own hands. That's a really good example, but also not relying on them so much. So before we started, I said to Racheal, is it all right if I put captions on? Or maybe I won't. I thought, I actually said it out loud to Racheal because I want to keep trying to push my ears. All right. So it does lead nicely on. It wasn't scripted. The thing you said about taking healing into my own hands, when we were talking about your story, with my story, both the back and the ears, was like, there must be something I can do. And weirdly, one of the things that I've discovered was a sort of pseudo-vegan diet with soy and no dairy. That will clear out all my ear, nose and throat stuff. So this is proving how open-minded I was. I did 6 months of absolutely hellish living back when I was a high-carb believer with soy instead of dairy. And I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And so after 3 months, I was ready to throw in the towel. But you know what it's like? Oh, you're not doing it right. You're not giving it long enough. I think 6 months is a long time to experiment, and it's giving me a headache just thinking about it. I was in a terrible state. And I just said, right, I've tried it. Soy, replacing dairy is about the worst thing I can do for my personal health. But I kept trying these things, which is... I've never done vegan or vegetarianism. I certainly did low fat, calorie restriction, lean protein, fruits, smoothies, all that stuff. And it was taking it into my own hands to do keto and then to do carnivore. So how about you? How did you take your healing into your own hands?
I think I came to a point where I just realized I'm getting sicker and sicker. And I know we discussed this in our last interview, but I got to a point where I was being recommended more neurosurgeries. So I had, 5 brain neurosurgeries, and I was at my sickest about a year to year and a half after that. And I was being recommended more surgery, and it just didn't feel right. I was so, so sick. And I thought to myself, if I am going to get better, this is not the way to do it. I'm looking back and I'm seeing that I've tried all these medications. I've tried these surgeries. I've tried these treatments that they're recommending me, and I'm getting sicker. And so it just showed to me that there had to be something else. And so I decided right there that I would be open-minded, that I would do anything that I could to heal. And so I really at that point took my healing into my own hands, and I looked into diet, I looked into nervous system work and brain retraining and just all these natural healing methods. And that's when I started to see progress. And I have gotten so many comments and messages like, what doctor recommended this diet for you? Or what doctor prescribed this brain retraining for you? And I say back to them, none. I made this choice on my own. I'm allowed to make choices for my own health. And I think it's so empowering to take your healing into your own hands. It can be scary, right? Like when you're really sick, it's scary because you want to have that guidance. And I think it would be nice for doctors to guide people and for people to have somebody to guide them in their journey. But unfortunately, that wasn't really an option for me at the time. And so it was either do this on your own or go this other way that has made you sicker. And so it was scary to make those changes because I was like, what if I get worse, and what if this is not the right way? But I just decided to take it into my own hands. And eventually that definitely became a positive thing and an empowering thing. At first it was scary, but it becomes empowering because, I think people want the easy fix, right? People want a pill or a surgery or something to fix them. They're searching for somebody else or something else to fix them when really the most important part of healing comes from within, and it comes from the choices that we're making. And so it's the harder way, but it's usually a lot more effective.
Yeah.
So.
Nobody knows your condition as well as you.
Yes.
You might find this interesting. I looked up a definition of the concept of taking healing into your own hands, and it said, this is a concept that emphasizes an active and empowered approach to one's healing journey. It involves adopting proactive measures, seeking out information, making informed choices, and collaborating with healthcare professionals to drive personal health and wellness outcomes. Now, the problem there is they're not open to it many times. And I'm sorry if people don't like hearing this. I've worked in and around the healthcare profession for nearly 15 years, and my obesity and diabetes specialism means that, I get referred from general practitioners, and most people that come to me have been given the wrong information. It's as simple as that. And going back to that domino effect, it's because they've been given the wrong information or the wrong guidelines. I don't think there's any ill intent. I don't think there's any of that. I just think it's misinformation coming from above, and their hands are tied. And I got a few comments about that expression, but that's true. It is true. Their hands are tied because there's huge onerous issues with insurance and professional indemnity. So even if a doctor did think, oh, this diabetes is out of control, maybe try low carb. I mean, that has loosened up recently. But, when I started, you couldn't recommend low carb for someone that was on the diabetic journey, for instance. And even if that person had taken it into their own hands and improved their numbers, they would get pushed back. And that still happens. So that concept is great, isn't it? I wouldn't add collaborating with healthcare professionals. I would put and try to collaborate with healthcare professionals, but don't let them put you off your path. That's personally what I would say, because it's important to your condition. Your condition better, and if you're doing things that are improving it, and they think that's the wrong thing to do, well, you're the one that's experiencing it. To me, it's maybe that's controversial.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, sometimes I actually get messages saying that what I'm sharing is dangerous and that I am spreading this dangerous message to people that have chronic illness. And I that just shocks me, and it makes me sad for that person that's saying it, because, honestly, if I were to continue down the Western medicine path, I don't know if I would be alive. And that's a scary thought. And I think it just shows how our society is just so bred to believe that we have to listen to doctors and they're the ones who can get people better. And it's just interesting because those people that are saying that are the ones that are still really sick and still identifying with their illness and not getting better. And it's just like, I look at all those people who, are in the chronic illness community, who are getting these doctor's appointments and these treatments and medications and surgeries. I don't see people getting better. And honestly, I don't care what people do to get better. Like, if you have a surgery and that helps you, I'll be cheering you on 100%. If you take a medication and that helps you, I mean, I'm not a fan of medication, but I will still be happy for you. But I just don't see those people getting better. And the people I see that are getting better are the ones taking their healing into their own hands and making these changes on their own. And so it's crazy that we are still believe that the medical system, medications, surgeries, and all these things are what we need to do when we get sick, because those people don't get better. And it's wild to me. And once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it,
Yes, and it is, yes, and I've had that remark about it's dangerous talking about health like this. And even to the point, I'm going to be very honest with you, I don't know if that last section will stay in the video because YouTube are so tight on those sort of things. So if you're watching this now and there's a sudden edit, we've taken a little bit out, but you can see that probably on another platform. Anyway, we're going to move on to nature and sunlight, because this is one of my pet peeves, because for 350,000 years as Homo sapiens, we've been outside in the sun, enjoying the sun. We didn't put loads of sun cream all over us. 75% of skin cancers are in areas that are not exposed to the sun. So it doesn't seem to be that great to keep out of the sun. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think nature is incredibly powerful for healing. And to be honest, I think one of the biggest drivers of chronic disease is our disconnection from nature, right? Like, we are constantly inside. The average American spends about maybe 30 minutes on average outside or less. And we're constantly on our phones, artificial lights, fake food. We're not connected to our food anymore. We're not grounding, synthetic shoes, just so many aspects of our life has become so disconnected from nature. And so I think it can be just so healing to spend more time in nature. And another thing, like you mentioned, is the sunlight, right? Like, we're taught to fear the sun, and the sun is our little life force. And there's nothing like going outside in the morning and getting morning sunlight and feeling that sun on your face. Like, it's so life-giving, and it's very healing. And so, yes, for me, spending time in nature has been very impactful for my healing. And actually, about 3 years ago, we moved to a new home, and we have some land and kind of live in a forested setting. And I think that was another, aspect of my healing was, not only getting to a new place, just having a new place where it's hard to heal where you got sick, right? So having a new change of scenery, but also being able to spend more time in nature, right? And so when I was in my really most intense healing phase, and my whole focus of there was a while there where pretty much the only focus of my life was healing, because that's all I could focus on doing, right? And so I would go outside and I would lay on the grass, with my bare feet, grounding, and just lay in the sun and do nothing and just lay there and do nothing but be present in nature. And that was really healing for me. And I think it's something that we're really missing in our society is connection with nature, time in nature. Like, anybody who is outdoorsy will tell you that they just feel better in nature. They feel like their problems aren't as, intense when you go outside. So when I feel stressed, I just go outside and I'm like, oh, maybe it isn't that bad, and so I just think it's so wild that if you like to spend time in nature, that's now labeled as an outdoorsy person. Like, aren't we meant to be nature? We're a part of nature, right? We're not meant to be trapped inside all day under artificial light.
Yeah, it yes. I know what you mean. It's like saying, look at that squirrel. That's very an outdoorsy squirrel, isn't it? You never say that. And I think that is, going back to sort of beliefs and how we look at things. And, there's just so much. I'm just going to go back to just announce in the middle of this. If there is bits cut out of this video and you want to see the full video, it will be on another platform. It'll also be on my app. So you can see the whole video unedited. But anyway, right. Trusting your body's ability to heal. Now, I always use this because people say, well, why would this get better? And I say, well, why wouldn't it? If you're going to cut yourself, would your skin heal? And it's like, yes, it would. So you firstly bought into the concept that your body has some healing abilities. It's not just going to keep bleeding. It's going to try and stop bleeding. All right. Unless you're seriously unwell and there's some other issue going on. If you have a bruise, that will go. If you sprain your ankle, normally that recovers. So, could you just get into your take on the body's ability to heal?
Yeah, so and that's one of the biggest messages I want to share is that our bodies are designed to heal. And it's interesting because, like, I think there are so many things about our modern world, like we were just talking about, that make it difficult for our body to do what it's designed to do, right? To heal. And so given the right state, I think healing is not only possible, but it's probable. And it's just like if one person has healed from a condition, that makes it possible. And honestly, I don't know that there's a condition I haven't heard somebody healing from. And yeah, it's our bodies were designed to heal. And I think it goes back to the nervous system as well, right? Like when we're stuck in a chronic dysregulated state, in a chronic stress state. And this is something that happens subconsciously, I might add too. It's not always like emotional triggers, it can be physiological triggers too. It can be toxins, it can be mold, it can be all these different things, but it doesn't matter so much what the trigger is. It just matters our nervous system's capacity to handle that stressor. And so that's a lot of what I'm doing with nervous system work, is just expanding the capacity of my nervous system to handle stressors. And so, yes, I definitely believe that our bodies have an ability to heal, even from the worst of places. Like, I know I have a pretty dramatic story, but I'm just going to tell you, Stephen, I have heard more crazy stories of healing than mine. I've heard stories of people being on TPN. Are you familiar with what that is? So TPN is IV nutrition. So not even a feeding tube. IV nutrition, not even able to tolerate tube feeds, to fully healing, fully eating again. Like, I've heard multiple people with feeding tubes that have been able to fully eat again and live a normal life and heal. And so healing is possible even from the worst of places. And it's easy when you're in that place to think my story is different. Like, my situation is different. Maybe this other person can heal, but my situation is unique. And that's what I always like to share, is that my story isn't unique. I'm not sharing my story to be like, hey, look at me, look what I did, this amazing thing, No, like, our bodies were designed to heal, and my story isn't unique. Like, my situation isn't unique. You can heal too. And so that's, I think, something that's really important. That goes back to the belief work, right? Too, like limiting beliefs, like, oh, I can't heal, and shifting that belief and believing that your body can fully heal can be huge. Oh,
I muted myself there, so we didn't get any feedback. But yes, I actually have a client success story that's coming out in a couple of weeks that went from TPN to
wow,
full health. Yeah, that does happen. You see that we're in the same space really, and people can make amazing discoveries. And this is why I sort of play down the sort of deafness and the trouble with my hip or my back when I was in my 20s, because some stories I hear just makes you want to weep. It just makes you want to cry. To think that they were given up on, actually, that's one of the things that frustrates me, by everybody. And luckily, the only person that didn't give up was them. and they just pushed and pushed and pushed. And you would imagine that everyone would be sort of getting in the corridor, opening doors for that person, trying to get them into where they want to try to be to get better. But I constantly hear stories of obstacles, and it's heartbreaking, but it's also very inspiring because, well, you're inspiring, because you look at your pictures, you look at the problems you were in, and you just think, wow, it would have been so easy to go, right, that's it. This is the cards I've been dealt. I've just got to deal with it. And it's very easy to do that. And many people do, sadly. But hopefully your story and many others will actually give them a little bit of open the curtain, let the sun in, and they can wake up to it. So that's a very cheesy segue into the next bit, which is circadian rhythms, actually. Would you like to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is something I became interested in just kind of gradually. I think sometimes when we change our diet, we just become more conscious of so many different other aspects of our health, and we kind of are slowly like waking up to all these different things that we can do to support our body and help our body to be able to heal. And so I kind of just came on to circadian rhythm just through seeing bits and pieces of information on social media, and that caused me to want to research it more. And so, it's very simple, right? Like our biology is designed to be in tune with our light environment. And so typically when people wake up in the morning, the first thing they look at is their phone, right? Nowadays. And that artificial light sends this false signal to our brain that it's the middle of the day. And so that kind of has a cascade of effects on our body, our hormones and everything, and really can affect our health, our sleep, and our energy levels. And so I started to stop, picking up the phone first thing in the morning, and I always go outside and I get natural light in my eyes. And if I happen to have to wake up before the sun comes out, then I'll wear the sunlight, the orange blue light glasses until the sun comes up, and then I'll go outside and get that natural light in. And just throughout the day, I will try to go outside and get that natural light as much as I can. Obviously, with my job, I'm spending a lot of time on my phone. I'm spending a lot of time on technology. And so I'll often even try to do work outside. Usually I do podcasts outside, but today it's really windy outside, so I didn't want it to be super loud. So that's why I'm taking it inside today. But yeah, it can help with the effects of blue light to be on your screen, whether it's your phone or your computer. And when you're outside, it can mitigate those effects. And then, of course, there are the glasses that you can wear. And so doing that has been really impactful for my sleep. I definitely notice that I sleep better. And at night, I also wear the orange blue light glasses for a couple of hours before going to sleep. And I find that really just like winds me down. And if I take them off and I see it's not just the screens. That's the other thing, is I always just thought it was the phones and the computers. And I was like, okay, well, I could just read a book and then, go to bed. But it's the artificial lighting too. And so unless you'd have, red lights installed in your house, then really the glasses are kind of the only way to block it out. And so that has really helped with my sleep as well, just getting as much natural light as I can and then blocking as much of the artificial light as I can.
Yeah, and I think it's borne out by science. People that work night shifts, I think it's something like they get virtually every condition or illness about 30% more. They're 30% more likely, or something like that. But also, I think we should look at nature and think, well, if you take a nocturnal animal, so for instance here, a badger does its foraging at night. You don't see a badger during the day. Now, if you saw a badger during the day, you would think there's something up, and that can't be good for the badger. So we're obviously designed to we're not nocturnal. We haven't got night vision. We're obviously designed to moving around during the light and sleeping during the dark. I mean, to me, it's not woo-woo or anything to say what you're saying. And we have artificially ruined our environment. And again, going back to animals, if you go to a zoo that has got nocturnal animals, they don't treat them the same. They make it as dark as possible, and they use different sort of lighting so you can see these nocturnal animals, and they give them an artificial nighttime during the day, and then they give them an artificial day during the night. So we know it is true with animals. We know that by just looking at animals in the wild, and if just imagine one that should be there that isn't there, or one that is there that shouldn't, how weird you would feel. You think, oh, that's not right. That's a nocturnal animal. It shouldn't be out. There must be something wrong. I'm sure you'd say that, because that's really odd. And yet us humans, we'd just break all the rules and think that's fine, and we're going to be, fine and dandy. All right, we're going to move on. We've got, I think, 3 more things to have a look at. Neck curve correction. That was an interesting one for me.
Yeah. So something that I had during my chronic illness journey was a lot of neck problems. I had neck instability. I had to wear a neck brace for, I think close to 5 years, 4 to 5 years. And that was a huge part of my healing journey. And the animal-based diet and carnivore diet really helped to support my connective tissue and strengthen my neck, strengthen just my whole body, right? But another thing that I developed, because I have a fusion, which puts my neck in a really unnatural position, is I had like a military neck with a forward neck posture. So I have a very small jaw. And this is another whole rabbit hole. I don't know if you've gone down it, but when you have a small jaw, then you kind of have a tendency to like get the forward neck posture to try to get air. So I did some chiropractic treatments where I like wore neck weights and stuff like that to help restore my neck curve as much as we can with having that fusion in my neck. But that was helpful for me, and it was really interesting because they actually like used an ultrasound and looked at the flow of my jugular vein, and like with and without the neck weight, my jugular vein just like opened up with the neck weight on. So that was just really interesting. And I think posture is another really important aspect of nervous system health. So like when we've got poor posture and forward neck posture, that puts a lot of strain on the vagus nerve and kind of puts you into more of the fight or flight side of the nervous system rather than the parasympathetic. So posture is a good thing to address to help with calming the nervous system and just healing in general as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, people are hunched over, and if you can get people to open up, they're going to breathe better. C3, C4, C5 keeps you alive. There's, the nerves coming from that part of the cervical region are really critical. And this, this bending over and looking at your phone is absolutely terrible. It's a terrible bit of posture. Moving on to the penultimate thing we wanted to talk about is movement. So I think that bleeds nicely in from that, because movement, I always say, it's really corny. Motion is lotion. There are many ways to look at this. Because I've worked in rehab for nearly 15 years. If someone has an arm in a sling, for instance, now they for 6 weeks don't move that arm, which is not great advice, but that's what they do. And then when they come to see me, the body has been amazing. It's just withered that muscle away. It really is. It looks terrible compared to the other arm. And that's just showing me how clever the body is, because the body's decided, this thing, this limb, this expensive thing to move doesn't need the nutrients. We don't need to send the amino acids to the muscles. We'll just let it wither away. This is true, by the way. So now, when I first started, now they realise that you need to exercise it and stuff like that. My point being that the lack of motion or movement is detrimental. Slight movement introduced, slight exercises stops that happening. So imagine if you could take that further. If you're having problems with any sort of mobility, any movement you can start to instigate. And this is where as a personal trainer as well, I've got a lot of hats and qualifications. I always say, if you want to do an intense exercise and you can only get out of a chair, then that is your intense exercise. Train to get out of the chair, then you train to walk. So it isn't like when we talk about movement, we're not going to say, right, get the Olympic rings out and start doing this and that. Movement is what you need to do to get you the next step. So, but how do you see it?
Yeah, I think this is such an important topic, and a lot of people that have serious chronic illness were before that athletes. You know, I was an athlete before I got really sick, and a lot of people that become really sick had that really high achiever mindset, and so I think it's really difficult for people to realize that they have to start in a different place, in a very different place. Like, especially if you're bedbound, like you're not going to be able to go do your ab workout at first that you did before you got sick. And so many people with chronic illness push it too far because in their mind, the only way to exercise is to do what they used to do. And so pacing yourself is really hard when you want something bigger and you don't want to, you want it to come right away, right? Like, and it's not going to. So you have to really pace yourself with that. And I think this can be a triggering topic for a lot of people with serious chronic illness because they're like, well, I can't do that, you know, but you can move. And even if your exercise is just raising your arms in bed, like start there and just very gradually work up and to a place where, you know, you are not, because you can over-exercise, right? You can do damage. And so when you're really sick, you have to go slow. You have to pace yourself. And that's something that I definitely struggled with. My husband was really helpful with that, like helping me to kind of develop exercises and things that like were in my window of tolerance at time. And as my window of tolerance increased, I increased those exercises and pacing myself was the best way to go about it. And so it's really hard to hear that, like if you're really sick, when you're, well, I can't even walk, right? Like, and it's hard for people to be like, well, you need to move more, you know? And so I think it's the way that you approach it and say, you need to meet that person where they're at and say your exercise is just going to be small, and you're going to widen that tolerance over time. And, you know, in a year or 2 years, like you can make a lot of progress if you do it in the right way. And so I think for me, you know, tying back into diet, I had that severe chronic fatigue where I would have those crashes from overdoing it, where I would just not be able to look at light or listen to sound or basically move at all, you know, like in bed. And diet really helped with that to where like when I overdid it, it wasn't as severe. And so I think combining those two things can be really powerful. And yeah, movement is definitely medicine, but you have to start where you're at.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And that is true as well. There's lots of little phrases I use in rehab. Like I say, motion is lotion is one of my favorite ones. I also think patience. You are a patient, but you got to be patient. So if you have a critical illness and you start on a road of trying to turn it around, unless it's an accident, a traumatic event, you know, sudden traumatic event, but if it's something that's grown over time, you have to think to yourself, well, it's not going to be 3 weeks when I'm back to normal. It's taken 15 years for my body to be like this. So, you know, I've got to be patient.
You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment. So,
yeah. The last thing was listening to recovery stories and stepping back from illness support groups, which is really interesting because, well, let's hear what you got to say on that. That's what.
Yeah. So actually, believe it or not, before I started sharing, you know, my carnivore and then brain retraining recovery story, I had a different account that I shared my chronic illness story. And I did it, you know, with an aspect of hope and faith and all these things. But all the people I followed on there were doing the same things I was doing, desperately researching their symptoms. They were trying to find answers from doctors, trying to find treatments, trying to find something else, an external source that was going to fix them. And I had to step away from that. I had to step away from that completely. I couldn't even look. And even to this day, like I really can't go back on that account because all I see is people in hospital gowns and getting surgeries and getting ports and feeding tubes and all these things that just are triggering for me after all I went through. And so getting out of that environment was really healing for me. And it was a necessary step. And so many people that have healed from serious chronic illness, say the same thing. And chronic illness support groups are meant to help and encourage people, right? But I think they can often be such a toxic environment because all people are connecting on is illness and symptoms. And it's this constant negativity where people are complaining and talking about symptoms and this desperation of searching for answers and doctors and treatments, and all the focus is on illness. And it's not healthy. It reinforces that neural pathway of I'm sick, and just seeing other people being sick. I think so much exposure to that can make you sicker. And it's just, for me, when I started a new account and I was like, okay, I'm starting a new account. This is going to be my healing journey. And I'm going to follow people that believe they can heal. I'm going to follow people that are healing. I'm going to listen to recovery stories because there are so many out there. It's interesting. I saw a comment on our last video. Somebody like, I'd never heard of somebody recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was like, I've heard hundreds, maybe even thousands of stories of people recovering. Like literally just type in YouTube chronic fatigue syndrome recovery story. And people don't stay around in those chronic illness Facebook support groups when they get better, because it's not a healthy environment, right? And so that was definitely a powerful thing for me. It was just shifting my focus to healing and associating more with people who were more in line with what I was doing. And that was hard because I made a lot of really great friendships and met a lot of great people. Like those people are great people. It's not the people, it's the environment, right? So it's normal to be desperate and hopeless and all these things when you're experiencing severe chronic illness, but that's not a healing environment. It's not conducive to healing. And so stepping away from that is definitely important.
Absolutely. Racheal, thank you so much. That has been a very interesting and enthralling hour. Thank you.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Your support means the absolute world to me. And if you're enjoying this show, I've got a small favour to ask you. I'd be incredibly grateful if you would consider becoming a supporter and make a small monthly donation. Your contribution will really help to improve the show. I'll be able to improve the software, maybe put a few more episodes out, and do many things that I'm hoping to do in the future. Do them a lot quicker. So, it's a small monthly contribution. You can cancel at any time, and the link is in the show notes. Thanks very much for listening.